Hey guys, welcome back to our Quest AI series where we discuss getting started or expanding on AI projects. So this week we're going to be touching on resourcing for AI projects. With me, I have Johann, our data scientist. He's here to answer some recent questions that I have. Hey, Johann.
Hey, Jess. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's Valentine's week, so it's a
We should
good
have
time
been
to
wearing
talk.
our red and pink today.
I know we're not big on Valentine's Day, but you know what? I will make time to answer some questions because people this week it's actually been busy, so we had to pick a few questions, and we'll probably answer some of them just in person. But
Okay,
the first
great.
one we actually got was on LinkedIn, and it was Nick. Actually, we work with Nick on a couple of projects.
That's right.
And his question is, I'm curious about the AI engineer role and how it's shaping the industry. How is it different from the more traditional roles like data scientist, ML engineer, and software engineer? So that's a philosophical question because everybody you're going to ask is going to have a different answer. And the difference between AI engineer and ML engineer, I think it's too nuanced. So what I want to discuss is more like what's the difference between the data science role and the ML or AI engineering role. So traditionally, when you look at a data scientist, it's somebody that comes with a background in some kind of research. I've worked with a lot of data scientists that's got PhDs in physics and biochemistry and a lot of those kind of scientific disciplines. So they have a really good understanding of experimentation, hypothesis testing, and very often a strong math or statistics background. The ML engineers on the other side are typically people that's just, they're hackers. They're really good at software development. Whereas, if you go and talk to the PhD in physics, person might be smart, but they're not the greatest software developer necessarily. So the skill sets are different. And I think the titles, the engineer versus the data science title, it gets mixed up all the time. So the question that Nick had is, I'm curious how the AI engineer role is shaping the industry. So answering just that specific question, having set the context is, I think a lot of what's happening these days is that you see companies like OpenAI and Meta and Google, they're releasing all these big base models, right? And you need somebody that's really good at engineering to put those things into production. Your data scientist wouldn't be my first pick to do it. They'll be the ones that probably created, a bunch of PhDs that created those algorithms. But the ones that's going to put it into production, Kubernetes and scale it in the cloud and all those, fancy things, that's going to be your engineer. And I think when you look at who's making the biggest impact today for business, it will be the engineering skill sets, the AI, ML engineers, whatever you want to, your preference to call them. So that is how I would look at that kind of role and the change in the impact that they're making. Now, I'm generalizing. I'm not saying that a software engineer is not going to be super skilled at hypothesis testing, all those things, but those are typically what we see when we look at resumes, when we look at experience, how we kind of divide and conquer. So I saw we have two other questions as well. I think that's also me, right?
Yes.
All right.
It looks like these are also from LinkedIn.
So I'll read it. We'll put it up on the screen. So this question, it's two questions from somebody, and I'm on this group. I'm on a few groups. This is the Data Science on Speed Dial group, and it's me and a friend of mine that's a data scientist. And this person reached out, Ricardo. I'm hiding his last name and everything just because I don't want to affiliate his company necessarily with him. But he gave me permission to post the question. So he wanted to see if we can help him understand how to get started with GPT, with a project using GPT. And I think the goal here is to use large language models to implement some kind of solution for them. Now, I'm going to go in depth answering that specific question in a different video, and we'll post that. You and I will jump into that because that by itself requires its own video. But just to briefly touch on it, he's got an engineer. And he wants his engineer to kind of start experimenting and have something valuable at the end. So my advice, in short, just to get him started is There's a couple of open source projects out there. I would steer away from that for the prototype. And the reason I say that is just with the open source community, you get the flexibility to implement things. With companies like OpenAI or with Azure, that wraps the OpenAI API in their own service, it's a little easier to spin up, a prototype and kind of test out the waters and see how it works. So my recommendation is, do it in the ecosystem that you're familiar with. And I happen to know they're an Azure shop. So they have access to Azure and all the services. I actually know the engineer he's talking about. And that person, I know they know Azure inside out. So they won't have a problem getting started. What they will need is a use case and how to kind of look at the use case. So I'll probably help them with specifying the type of use case and then finding a persona. And with the persona, that's just kind of like saying, what is a role that we can use and what kind of tasks will that persona need to complete that we want to automate using some kind of language model? So that would be my recommendation for them to have something, because at the end of that prototype, they'll know, is it the right technology? They'll figure out some of the shortcomings and, do we need to do a full-on model training? Can we do fine tuning? Do we have to, do some prompt engineering? So there's a lot of discovery that they're going to do during that prototype without having to go and, build their own ecosystem to run language models in. Can be done, but I wouldn't do it for a prototype. The second part of the question is, Johann, I would also like to talk about, hiring our first full-time data scientist. And he says, I know their stack and stuff, so I have a good insight. So this is a tricky one because it's different for every company. So as a general guideline, when is the right time to hire a data scientist or a machine learning engineer? I would say when you have really good projects defined and you have a good sense of what you want to accomplish using that. The myth out there is that if I hire a data scientist, that is going to help us build AI and AI projects. And it doesn't work like that. You don't hire data scientists and it's sprinkle a little data science and voila, there you go. A little anecdotal story. A couple of years ago, one of our clients, a big Fortune 100 company, actually, I don't want to mention the industry because it's, there's not a lot of competitors. But they came to us and they had a hard time getting their data science projects executed. And I went back and I looked, just because I keep in touch. I actually worked for them years ago. So I know that they've been hiring data scientists. So my question was, who's leading the data science team? And what they did is they've had this culture of moving executives around. And they actually moved somebody who was a director in, I think, accounting and finance, moved them into that role, business analytics and then data science. And the challenge is that they had no leadership. That person didn't know how to run a data science team. So they had a huge turnaround. They had 10 data scientist roles open at any time. And they could never keep them because they would hire somebody. That person would sit around, trying to figure out stuff, get bored, move on. And that's just the nature of it. If you have the right skills, data science, machine learning, AI, you can get a job, and you can get a job that's going to pay you more. So losing those people is not a good thing if you don't have good projects. So if we think about, just answering Ricardo, I think in their case, my recommendation would be to get a part-time, hire somebody to work on a project and first bring some value out of, the data that you have, learn some lessons. The other project they want to do with the GPT is a great way to kind of, get a little bit of experience before they go and hire somebody. So that would be my recommendation. Don't go hire somebody immediately. First, build up your internal skill set and leadership skills.
Okay, great.
All right.
And then I did have one last question. This is actually a discussion that we were having with a client. They're asking, what processes do you go through to find good technical resources? And I'll just go first on this one. Just from a recruiting point of view, we will typically, start out by speaking with the client, getting key points and technologies that they're looking for. We obviously, we have a huge access to a database and, of course, my little black book of contacts that I've built up over the years. So that's my recruiting standpoint on that. And then what about you?
So I want to mention something. I've worked with you and with Jason, one of our other partners, for a long time. Just when I was on the other side, using you guys to help me recruit data science, machine learning, software engineers, web developers, you name it, right? Mm-hmm. And the one thing that always worked really well for me is that partnership. I mean, how do you see that? Is that something?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, just to hop on that, it's more than just a vendor relationship. We feel like it's a team. We're working as partners. I feel like building that relationship and having that extension of the team to help find the best resources is really what truly helps us in our search for that.
Yeah, I think that's valuable because I didn't have a lot of time to go and filter through resumes and stuff like that. So you guys definitely at that time was very good at getting me good candidates quickly. So from my point of view, right, when we put people on projects, I typically get the resumes from you, from Jason, from Bill, from all the other people on the team. And the first thing is we do a 15-minute quick screen. Within 15 minutes, I just want to see if there's a good fit, if there's any red flags or anything. And then we'll schedule a deep dive. And it depends. If I'm interviewing, even if a client is asking us to execute the project, right? The first part of the interview is going to be the technical portion, where we go through if it's a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, AI. I'm going to focus on what the project requires, or if the client is trying to hire somebody, what they're looking to accomplish. For instance, if I hire a data scientist that's an expert on NLP, but the client is looking for computer vision, it's not a good match. It's like hiring a Java developer to work on C#. They can probably figure it out, but they're not going to be the best resource for that. So even within the data science, machine learning, engineering skill set, you have to find out, does this person know time series analysis? The fact that they're, on their resume have data science, machine learning engineer does not mean they know everything. And that is how we kind of do the first screening. With the software engineering, it's a little different in the sense that, we can go by language or framework or, even the type of application, being it the enterprise, web services, app development, whatever. So I want to give you an example. So, Jess, I use this a lot, and I'm giving away my interview secrets here.
Secrets.
Yes. But I've used it for a long time, and there's no right answer. I think there's a righter answer, but I do this because I want to see how people kind of think in that interview process, right? So I give them a problem, and we kind of work through it. And the problem I typically give, and I'll just do it high level, is I tell them we have a base a model, right? And this base model, it could be Java, C#, doesn't matter. It's been in existence forever. So the company that you're going to work for, they don't want to change that because there's a lot of dependencies. There's other applications that's inherited from that model. Now, I said the word inherited in software development. That should be a clue to the person that we're talking about inheritance, polymorphism, technical stuff. But in a typical interview, if you ask somebody, do you know polymorphism or inheritance, they're going to give you the typical textbook explanation. So what I'm trying to do is see how do they apply that knowledge. So then I'll tell them, okay, this base model have 5 functions. Those 5 functions can change them. You have to create a new class that uses 2 of those functions and hides 3 of the other functions so that any application that uses the new class will have access to only those 2 functions. Let's say it's an encryption and decryption method or function. I don't want your application to have access to the other 3 for security or whatever reason, right? So then we talk through the process, do we do abstraction, inheritance, whatever, and we go through the object-oriented design principles, which is very specific for software engineers. So I'm giving that example because that is how I find, no interview is perfect, but that's a better way for me to kind of screen through candidates than just asking tell me, how do you use polymorphism or inheritance, whatever? The same applies with data science, talking about a time series analysis and why would you use, a REMA over some other method, or Bayesian logic. Those are things that you can always ask people, and you get people that interview really, really good. But once you start pushing them on using or applying those answers, that's where you find the holes in the whole, interview process. So what do you think?
Yeah.
Did that answer give you a good sense?
That's a good overview for sure. I appreciate it.
So that's our questions for this week, right?
Yes, we're all set. So guys, make sure you tune in next week for more questions, and we will see you then.
All right. Thank you.